Hi, and welcome to What Happened Breach Breakdown. Today we talk about React2shell. React2shell is a nasty compromise which has been used very widely. It was first discovered around December the 5th, 2025, and it has a CVSS score of 10.0, which is as high as it gets. Now, I've talked before about how that doesn't always reflect how it's important it may be to you, but you really need to know about this one. And it's an interesting one to study as well. So what is it, first of all? Well, React is an open source library. It's a JavaScript library for doing application UI. So when you're in your browser, it's how you interact with your browser and all those sorts of things. And it sits on the server, and there's things on your browser which allow it to talk back to the server, so there can be re-interactions. And it's very well used. There's lots of people use it, and it's part of lots of other libraries such as next.js. And so the reach of this is very large. In fact, there's been some estimation that nearly 40% of all cloud environments contain vulnerable reach instances, i.e. places where this could be an actual problem for you. So let's talk a bit about it. What is the issue? Well, it's CVE 2025-55182 if you need to look that up, and it's, as I said, used it's part of JavaScript. What it does is it uses unauthenticated remote code execution to do its bad stuff, and often remote code execution is the sort of be-all and end-all, the thing you want as an attacker, because it allows you to do pretty much anything on the server system. So why is this possible? So let's talk about how this works a bit. You need to understand client-server architecture a bit to understand this, and you'll find a link to a video I've done that in the description. Also understand remote code execution versus local code execution, and again I've got a link to a video in the description below. But so generally, when you're using your browser, you're interacting with websites around the world. There's stuff happening on the browser, and that's fine. Obviously, you need to protect the browser because that's protecting you. But also that the websites which you're interacting with, well, in order for you to be able to do that interaction, they have code in the back end which is talking to the website, and in the end talking to the browser, your browser on your desktop or on your laptop or on your phone, whatever it may be. And to be clear, this is not a vulnerability in your side. On the client side, it's not a problem for the browser. It's a problem for the other end, because what it allows things to do is using any application which is crafted with this React library, early versions which have not been patched. It allows a malicious request to be sent from a browser to that library. And what that malicious request, and it just can take one single HTTP or HTTPS request, allows is for the attacker to compromise the host system of the website that is running this the server and the React pieces. And so there's this thing called React server components, which are the bits that sit on the web server side, and that's where the problem is. But even if you don't implement on the website side any of what are called React server function endpoints, which is kind of how you generally expect the JavaScript on the browser to talk back to the server. Even if you don't do that, you can still have problems if you have these components in your code, even if they're not being used in the obvious way. And possibly the worst news is that even if you set up React in its standard default configuration, you don't change anything, you don't do anything obviously bad, it's still vulnerable in unpatched versions. So this means that if you had an old version of React and you hadn't patched it, then even if you set it up quite normally, and even if you weren't necessarily using what you would think would be the vulnerable pieces, it's possible that your website, your system could be compromised, and someone could gain remote code execution capabilities on that machine, which is pretty terrible. So next, has it been used? Have people used it? Well, the answer is sadly yes. As I said, it was first noticed in December 2025, and pretty much immediately there were lots of public proof of concept exploits available. This is a tricky one. Is it a good thing or a bad thing that people show how to use these vulnerabilities? Well, in one way, it's good because it allows people to defend against them. But on the other hand, it's bad because it makes it much easier for people to take the code that is a proof of concept and use it to implement attacks. So yes, it has been used, and particularly by various what are called Chinese nexus actors. I should explain what that means. It means actors, malicious actors, groups who are aligned with Chinese interests, even if they're not nation-state actors. And again, if you want to know about nation-state attacks, you'll find a link in the description below. It's very interesting. So these are groups which are aligned with Chinese interests, even if they are not, part of the Chinese government or part of the Chinese People's Liberation Army, for instance. And so it's absolutely out there and it's absolutely being used. And you absolutely need to find whether it's a problem for your systems and to fix it if needs be. So what do you need to do? Well, the first thing you do, it's pretty simple, is find out if you're using React, which version of React you're using, and make sure that you're upgraded to one of the newer versions where this has been patched and where it's no longer a problem. Although, as I mentioned, there's actually lots of other libraries which also use the React library, and so you may not even be aware you're running it. Next.js, for instance, is one, and you can find a list of which Next.js libraries are safe and which ones are vulnerable. But it may be that you're using a bunch of different things and you don't even know you're using that they're using React in the background. So you need to look at the dependencies of your applications, of your server-side pieces, and to see whether they are using React back there. And if they are, well, it's absolutely time to upgrade those to make sure the versions you're using are up to date. Generally worth thinking about patching stuff anyway, of course. So what does this teach us? Well, there's a couple of things. The first one is that you should always be authenticating calls back to a server. In a client-server architecture, you don't want things talking back and you're not knowing who they are, not checking that whether they have appropriate authority to do what they should do. So authenticate and then authorize before you do anything else. The other thing, of course, is what is the appropriate privilege for applications on server side. When you're designing server-side applications or components, how much privilege, what capabilities do they actually need to have? Because if they already have high privilege, then if they are compromised, then they could do bad things. So understanding privilege, and again, I've got a link to that in the description in a video I've done on that, is an important thing to do. So lessons, well, if you're running this, check to see whether you're using a compromised version, patch if needs be. If you're not sure, then check dependencies and patch. If you're designing a system, think hard about authentication. And if you're designing a system, also think very hard about privilege. So I hope that's all useful. Lots of links there. Please subscribe. I have a playlist where I talk about breach breakdowns and how they happen and what we can do about them. If you've got any questions about this or anything else, please get in touch. I love hearing from my viewers. Thanks. Bye.